My in-laws used my son's college fund to give it to their criminal grandson. But if you bet on criminals, you become one. I'm 48 years old, and I'm here to vent some of my frustration with you. I've seen that a lot of people post about their lives on Reddit, so I thought, why not? It won't have the best format, because I've never posted before. I apologize in advance for that. A long time ago, my husband Alex, who is 50 years old, and I had a conflict with my in-laws. My father-in-law Ben and my mother-in-law Violet did something that broke our hearts. When my son Kid, who was 24 years old, was young, my in-laws promised to create a college fund for him. They were supposed to do it for him and for their other grandson, John, who is the same age as my son. John is the son of my brother-in-law Nico. Alex and Nico are twins, and their sons were born just 1 month apart. Kid and John were both very loved by my in-laws. But as the years went by, they got closer to John for various reasons. And that was fine for us, since they also cared a lot about Kid. We had a good relationship with my in-laws, and I really thought they were wonderful grandparents. But then they did something that I haven't been able to forgive. Right when my son graduated, my in-laws announced that they would no longer give him the college fund, because they were going to spend that money on John. Yes, John also had a college fund, but it was being used for something else. He was never going to go to college, because he didn't even manage to graduate from high school. For context, John is an extremely spoiled man. He has a horrible, entitled attitude that only got worse as he grew up. Yes, but that wasn't his only problem. John was also a known criminal. I'm not exaggerating in the slightest. He was arrested several times for destroying public property, among other things. He was also a regular drug user. So yes, he did many criminal activities before committing one of the biggest mistakes of his life. He got in trouble with the law and was immediately sent to prison. My in-laws were always the ones who bailed John out of jail. And they did it that time too. But they didn't expect how much it would cost to keep John out of prison. So instead of letting him take any responsibility for his actions, they decided to take away my son's college fund to keep their other grandson out of prison. My son is a great student and got into an incredible university right after high school. It was an expensive place, and our income didn't allow him to qualify for a scholarship. So he had to find a way to pay tuition by any means possible. Kid was relying on his grandparents' college fund to attend that university. When Violet and Ben said they would no longer give him that fund, Kid was devastated. We didn't have the money to send him to college, and his own savings wouldn't have been enough. My in-laws knew that Kid would be upset. So they took the easy way out and told us. Instead of telling Kid directly, Alex and I were the ones who had to tell our son that there would be no money for college. I will never forget the devastation I saw on his face when he realized that he might not be able to attend the university of his dreams. Alex and I had a big argument with my in-laws about their decision. We told them they were showing favoritism by taking away our son's college fund for their other grandson. My in-laws were very indifferent and dismissive about it, and told us that we were acting entitled. There was a big fight, after which my husband, my son, and I kept contact with them. That was 5 years ago. Recently, my in-laws got in touch with Kid. apologizing, and saying they wanted a chance to reconnect and rebuild our relationship. My son was quite upset about it. He told my in-laws that he didn't want anything to do with them after such a big betrayal. Violet and Ben then called us crying and begged us to help them reconnect with Kid. The thing is, we don't want to tell Kid to reconcile with them. After Violet and Ben dismissed us, it was very hard for us to get Kid into his dream university. We had to refinance our house to send him there. I didn't want my son to work himself to death to pay off student loans. So Alex and I decided to help him as much as we could. Our son Kid went to college and did an amazing job. Now he has an excellent job and earns better than expected. He even helped us pay the mortgage very recently. Despite everything, our son managed to become successful. But that doesn't mean we didn't suffer from what they did. The most horrible thing was that my in-laws showed very little remorse for their actions, and instead were overly concerned about their other grandson. They never contacted us in the past 5 years, nor did they ask why we no longer visited them. They live in another state, so contact was a little difficult. But at the very least, they could have sent a text or called. They didn't even invite us for Christmas or Thanksgiving. It wasn't just us cutting contact with them. They also made no effort to speak with us. Now, suddenly, they are back and begging us to convince our son to forgive them. I am so disturbed by all of this that I feel like I'm about to lose my mind. My husband is also upset. My son appears pretty stoic about all of this, but I know he doesn't appreciate their endless messages. I'm considering blocking them, because it's been 10 days and they're still complaining. Just writing all of this brings back bad feelings. But I really needed to share my frustration somewhere. I know my son has no right to any money from my in-laws. Of course, it's their money and they can do whatever they want with it. But they need to understand how their decisions affected us. My husband and I didn't save for a college fund because we knew Violet and Ben were going to pay for Kid's college. That was their promise. If we had known they wouldn't keep their word, we would have started saving for our son. My in-laws insisted that we didn't need to save anything because they would take care of Kid's college fund. I know it was our fault for believing them. That's why we did everything we could to fix it. The decision to take away the college fund was also made very abruptly, so we didn't see it coming. When my husband and I saw that my in-laws were withdrawing money for John, we asked them if they were financially stable enough to spend so much money on him. We also asked if they still planned to pay for our son's college. We didn't think they were going to give the fund to John, but we did think maybe they needed the money for themselves, since they were burning through their savings recklessly. They had multiple opportunities to tell us that they would not give Kid the funds they had promised him. Still, they chose to wait until the last moment and then acted indifferent. Until that point, they assured us that the money was still there. Kid was hurt because they were choosing John over his future. That all his effort to live a good life meant nothing. I will never forget those days. Honestly, my in-laws do not deserve to be part of the life my son has built for himself. I don't know how they expected us to just forgive and forget everything. Update 1. Hello. Before giving an update on our situation, I want to answer a few questions that keep coming up. I already explained in the edit why we never saved for Kid's college. If you haven't read it, please go back and take it into account. Many of you wanted to know if there was jealousy between Kid and John. The answer is a resounding no. They were never close because my brother-in-law, Nico, and his family lived in another country for 10 years. So they didn't exactly grow up together. They got along civilly, but John generally preferred to stay away from the family. He started getting into trouble at age 12. At which point, he pretty much distanced himself from everyone. Speaking frankly, John's sense of entitlement didn't sit well with us. Nor with Kid. John was used to living a luxurious life and expected everyone to meet his needs. When things didn't go his way, he used to throw massive tantrums and even break things. While doing so, little by little, my son began to distance himself from John too. Believe it or not, my son is a good person and not the kind who makes enemies without reason. John is the one who never liked anyone. Not even his own family. Now also, some of you have been asking why my in-laws favored John so much. And some of you asked what role his parents played in all of this. Well, when Nico returned to our country, he had lost his job and needed help from his family. They started living with my in-laws because they were struggling financially. My in-laws were very generous and supportive people, so they welcomed them with open arms. They saw that John was having a hard time adjusting to the new lifestyle and did everything they could to spoil him. They probably didn't know that this would have a terrible impact on his personality. At first, John's parents warned my in-laws that they were encouraging his bad behavior. Every time John got into trouble, my in-laws would get him out of it or make excuses for him. If Nico and his wife tried to discipline John, Violet and Ben would step in to protect him. Eventually, John stopped listening to his parents because he knew they no longer had authority. Nico was eventually able to buy a house after 4 years. But by then, John was already out of control. He stayed with my in-laws and refused to return, no matter how much Nico and his wife insisted. Violet and Ben should have realized what they were doing. But instead, they pressured Nico to let John continue staying with them. John went completely wild in the following years and began committing crimes. I know Nico had several fights with my in-laws because he couldn't stand seeing his son destroy his life like that. Violet and Ben always defended John and said that he would change on his own. When he got a DUI and caused an accident, Nico and his wife were devastated. They immediately told John that they would cut ties with him if he didn't change. They also didn't agree with Violet and Ben giving my son's college fund to John. Nico and his wife wanted John to face the consequences of his actions. But of course, my in-laws couldn't bear to see their poor grandson rot in jail. So they did what they thought was best for John. I believe all this information has clarified some of your questions. As for why my in-laws have suddenly reached out again, I'm not entirely sure. One reason could be that my son recently announced his engagement. They plan to have a long engagement, so the wedding won't be for at least 2 more years. Maybe my in-laws thought this was the right time to make peace and earn an invitation to the wedding. I don't know. I can't be sure, given that my son doesn't even want to talk to them. They've started harassing my husband and me constantly. Well, we're all tired of them. My husband has been under a lot of pressure because his parents are driving him crazy. I can see that he's really struggling. So we decided that at least the 2 of us would sit down and hear them out. Frankly, I don't care. But I think it'll be good to have all the information before making Any big decisions? At this point, we've already scheduled a meeting with them for next week, since they said they'll be flying to our city. However, they'll be staying in a hotel because they are not welcome in my home. My husband and I will go to their hotel to talk. The next update will take a while because the meeting is in a week. I'll return once we've had the conversation and I can figure out why they're so desperate for reconciliation. Hi again. I know some of you might think this is a bad idea, but it's the only thing we can come up with right now. Some of you have speculated that maybe they want money or something like that. I don't know about that, but I guess we'll find out. Rest assured, we're not giving them money, if that's what this is about. Update 2. Hi guys, I'm back with an update. Yesterday, my husband and I went to meet with my in-laws. They had been asking us to bring Kid, but we firmly refused. Besides, Kid is not a child, so we can't force him to go anywhere with us. We simply told him that his grandparents wanted to see him, but he said he didn't want to go. They had also been messaging him, and he told them the same thing. I don't know why, but for some reason, they thought my husband and I would convince him to come. When we went to see my in-laws, they immediately looked sad because Kid wasn't with us. We chose not to comment on it. We sat down to talk, and my husband immediately started asking why they suddenly remembered us and our son after so many years. Violet and Ben genuinely looked very sad and guilty when Alex asked that question. Then Ben started telling us what had happened after we lost contact. According to them, they were sure that helping John was the right thing to do. They admitted they made a big mistake, and now they were paying for their bad decisions. When John was sent to jail, he seemed extremely remorseful and begged my in-laws to help him. Violet and Ben had an emotional conversation with him, where he promised to do better, go to rehab, and make amends. Basically, he promised to be better if he was given another chance. Violet and Ben believed him because they loved him blindly, so they did everything they could to get him out of prison. They paid his bail, his lawyer, and even his rehab. I don't know how, but they managed to keep him out of jail despite his record. John was sentenced to community service and probation. He also had to pay a large amount of money to the victim. My in-laws knew this would happen, and that's why they decided to take the college fund away from Kid instead of draining their own savings. After all, they focused on John so that he could get better. And that is another reason why they didn't have the time or energy to reach out to us. After this whole fiasco, Nico and his wife completely gave up on John. My brother-in-law told Violet and Ben that John was now their problem because they had taught him not to listen to his parents. My in-laws were convinced they could change John. They even told Nico that he would eat his own words when John became a good man. Well, that never happened because my in-laws failed miserably. I know no one will be surprised by this. Apparently, John went to rehab, but left after 1 week. He made up excuses about how he was treated badly at the facility and that he felt suicidal staying there. John, Violet, and Ben believed his story as always. They told him to take a break and go back to another rehab later. That never happened either. John immediately started using drugs again and getting into trouble. He also began Stealing. From my in-laws, as if he didn't already have enough issues. Violet and Ben. Got a small reality check. When John stole Violet's engagement ring. And pawned it for who knows what. When they confronted him and scolded him. He started crying and threatened to end his life. That guy. Knows exactly how to manipulate and blackmail people. It's no wonder he became an experienced criminal. And avoided consequences for so long. Violet and Ben were too weak to realize they were being manipulated. Over time, John got worse and began abusing Violet and Ben when they tried to stop his criminal activities. I'm not sure what kind of abuse it was, as they didn't go into detail. Then, very recently, John went back to jail. He went through the whole cycle of getting better. But this time, my in-laws put an end to it. They cut off all contact with him and told him they would no longer help. After that, my in-laws started to feel extremely guilty for their actions and began to realize how big their mistake had been. They felt ashamed for having taken away kids' future in favor of such a horrible grandson like John. At that moment, Kid announced his engagement, which made my in-laws desperate for reconciliation, according to their words. Eventually, they realized how badly they had messed up. That's why they are now desperate for Kid's forgiveness. They kept begging us to help them rebuild their relationship with our son. My husband and I listened to everything, and then we told them exactly how much they had hurt Kid. We didn't leave anything out. My in-laws were crying and kept apologizing. Finally, my husband told them that their apologies were too late. Then I said that Kid is already a grown man, and we will respect his decision not to have contact with them. Especially because we also intend to keep no contact with them. My husband and I left. After that, we were shocked to see just how much they had spoiled John. It's just bizarre. I'm still struggling to process everything. Yes, I can see that my in-laws are suffering. But I still don't think they deserve our forgiveness. My husband feels the same way. We told Kid everything. And he didn't have much to say either. For now, we're standing firm in our decision not to resume contact or rebuild our relationship. I don't think there will be any more updates after this. We are not going to change our minds. Update 3. I know I said there would be no more updates. But we discovered something shocking a few days ago. As I already mentioned, we had decided not to rebuild our relationship with my in-laws. That decision was final. We were ready to put all of this behind us and focus on our lives. But 2 days after we met with my in-laws, Nico called us. He called Alex and asked us to join a video call with him and his wife. To be honest, I was afraid they were going to make excuses or tell us to forgive my in-laws. Nico told Alex that it was an emergency and that we needed to talk to them before contacting my in-laws again. So we scheduled the video call as soon as possible. They said they knew we had met with Violet and Ben, so they had to contact us to give us a warning. It turns out my in-laws didn't tell us the whole truth. It's true that John messed up again and is in jail, awaiting trial. But it wasn't for a minor offense. John, this was his second DUI, actually ended up killing someone. I wish I were making this up. But I'm not. John repeated his previous mistake and killed someone. It's a huge mess right now. His lawyer made it clear that he is definitely going to prison and will have to pay a lot of money to the victim's family. His previous criminal record makes it impossible for him to avoid prison this time. This can't be fixed with more lawyers. This ends with John going to prison and serving his sentence for killing someone. Of course. John cried to Violet and Ben. Up to that point, their story matched what my in-laws had told us. But they lied about what happened next. Contrary to what they said, Violet and Ben actually agreed to help him again. No, they didn't cut him off for good. In fact, they agreed to help. But this time, they simply didn't have the funds to pay for everything. They went to Nico and asked for help. But he flat out refused. Violet and Ben then insulted them and yelled at them for letting their son go to prison. Nico simply told them that they were the ones responsible for John destroying his own life. Nico and his wife told my in-laws that neither John nor they meant anything to them anymore. So my in-laws racked their brains for a while and then decided to reach out to us. Most likely, they hoped to rebuild a relationship through manipulation and then ask my son for money. They knew my son had a good job. And so did his fiancée. In their minds, this was the best solution for the situation. Nico is certain that's the case, because they still shame him and his wife for not helping their son. They've also been telling people that kid would save him soon. Hearing all this made my husband and me furious. We couldn't believe Violet and Ben could be so manipulative and toxic. Either they've learned from John, or we now know where John learned it from. Thank God, none of us gave in and started a relationship with them again. Nico and his wife were also extremely angry. They also blame my in-laws for completely ruining John's chances at redemption. We had a long conversation, and a lot of things came to light about my in-laws. They're simply not good people. Someone died because of John's actions. And also because of my in-laws' actions. This is no longer just a story about favoritism. It's a criminal story. I believe this has solidified our decision not to let my in-laws into our lives. They can figure things out on their own. Karma is catching up to them. And I'm certain of it. All we have to do is wait and see. The day will come when they truly regret everything they've done. But I don't think that day is here yet. Update 4. I completely forgot about this post until someone sent me a private message yesterday asking what happened next. My son and his fiancée actually set a wedding date earlier than they thought. So we've been completely occupied with wedding planning and all of that for quite some time. Nothing else has happened with my in-laws since we blocked all of them. So we've been enjoying the peace. And this post totally slipped my mind. I'm getting old, and I can feel it. Anyway, I wouldn't come back with an update if I didn't have one. I went back and saw that many of you were waiting for karma to come back around to my in-laws. It looks like you're all pretty invested in this. I see now that you won't be disappointed to know that karma, indeed, came from my in-laws. Just as we had all predicted. Shortly after I made this post, we once again cut contact with them. We blocked their numbers and everything. Nico and his wife did the same. It was 4 months later when Nico called us to give us an update about them. Violet and Ben showed up at his house, looking more miserable than ever. Even though Nico wasn't interested in hearing what they had to say, they kept talking anyway. It wasn't news to Nico that John had to go to prison. Justice didn't fail this time. It literally made the local news. So everyone knew what he had done. My in-laws were criticized for letting things go that far, because everyone knew John was living with them. Violet and Ben tried everything they could to keep John out of prison, but it had catastrophic consequences for them. They spent all their money on legal fees. and other things. They even had to mortgage their home because of how the costs kept piling up. Let's not forget they've been spending their money on John for almost a decade. They had no options left. In the end, John went to prison, and they couldn't stop it. All their money went down the drain. It was shortly after that when the police knocked on their door again. Now they're being investigated for bribing the officers in charge of the case. Violet and Ben had clumsily tried to bribe jury members with money. They've probably done other things we don't even know about. The news has spread quickly, and now they're in serious trouble. They went to Nico for help and sympathy, but he laughed and slammed the door in their faces. They're still being investigated, and apparently there's enough evidence against them. It looks like my in-laws will be going to prison too. This is unbelievable to us. They've truly hit rock bottom. I'm glad we no longer have anything to do with this. I don't even feel sorry for them. They could have had a peaceful life after retirement. But they chose to do bad things. And they finally ended up in big trouble. Karma really is sweet sometimes, to be honest. On the other hand, if they do go to prison, it might actually solve a lot of their problems. In prison, they won't have to pay for anything. Unlike the outside world, where they had almost no money left. So that's the update on the situation. As far as my family and I are concerned, we have nothing to do with my in-laws anymore. We've built a strong family for ourselves. And we don't need their unwanted presence in our lives. Alex and I are doing very well right now. And we are extremely excited for Kit's wedding. I hope all of you bless the happy couple and pray that their marriage will be a great success. Update 5. My in-laws' defense has been handed over to a public defender. I don't think that's surprising to anyone, since they spent everything they had on defending John. And as a consequence of their efforts to get John out of this mess, they've ended up receiving a sentence of 3 years in prison and a $30,000 fine. The judge has ordered their house to be sold to pay this amount. They don't need it now. But in 3 years, when they get out, they'll have to find somewhere to live. When John gets out after serving his sentence, at least he'll still be young. He'll have wasted a big part of his youth. But at least he'll still have the energy to work on something. When my in-laws get out, they'll have nothing. Both Nico and my husband believe they won't be their problem in 3 years. As sad as it may sound, for a pair of elderly people to end their lives this way, it really isn't that sad when you've seen it coming and tried to stop this trajectory. There's not much else to do about them now. I don't know if in 2028 I'll post another update or not. That's still so far off. I don't know what my life will look like by then. But even with so much time ahead, it still isn't enough for us to ever help my in-laws. That was made clear the day they chose to help a criminal instead of helping our son. From that moment, they sealed their fate. And this is exactly what they deserve.